compared to last year. That's according to a new Forbes advisory survey that says close to half say they'll spend about the same, and nearly 1 in 5 said they plan to tighten their belts. And that's the latest. I'm Ray Harris on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
If you like using debit over credit, shouldn't you also get rewarded? Well, now you can with Discover Cashback Debit. It's a checking account that rewards everyone with cash back on everyday purchases with no fees, period. Check out eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Clippers are on a 4-game winning streak. They held on last night to beat Portland by 5. Strong game from Kawhi Leonard, 34 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals. Kawhi has scored 75 points in the last 2 games. James Harden and Paul George had 20 points each. Quick turnaround for the Clippers. They play Sacramento tonight at Crypto.com. The Lakers are in Dallas tonight. First game for the Lakers since winning the in-season tournament Saturday night in Vegas. 4:30 tip-off on TNT. More bad news for the Chargers and a bad season. They will not have quarterback Justin Herbert for Thursday night's game against the Raiders in Vegas. Herbert has a fractured finger on his throwing hand. The Chargers are 5-8. Even if they won their last 4 games, they will not make the playoffs. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
It's the gift-giving season, and we have a gift for you. Visit us online at KBLA.store for holiday savings of 20% off all of our KBLA swag. For the best in merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store right now. And be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all our official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580, at 20% off, but only during the holiday season. Happy holidays.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!
I don't wanna write this down. I don't wanna tell you how I feel right now. I don't wanna take no time to write this down. I don't wanna tell you how I feel right now. Hey, tomorrow may never come. For you or me, life is not promised. Tomorrow may never show up. For you and me, this life is not promised. I ain't no perfect man, I'm trying to do the best that I can with what it is I have. I ain't no perfect man, I'm trying to do the best that I can with what it is I have. Put my heart and soul into this song. I hope you feel me from where I am to wherever you are. I mean that sincerely. Tomorrow may never come. For you and me, life is not promised. Tomorrow may never appear. You better hold this very moment. It's very close to you right now. Very close to you right now. So close to you right now. So close to you. Don't be afraid. Let it shine. My homie said, shine your light on the world. Shine your light for the
KBLA Talk 1580.
My hobby said, shine your
This should be quite an interesting conversation. I'm glad you're here with us. Live with me in studio, the president of something called the 40 Acre Conservation League. She's an award-winning marketing guru, public relations strategist, writer, professional manager in both private and public sectors. And she's been engaged in community government, media relations, crisis communications, events, communications planning, philanthropy, and so much more. Jade Stevens, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. We're also being joined on the telephone by the executive director of the California African American Water Education Foundation. That was founded in 2019. He is striving to increase our water IQ. He is also the founder and managing partner of Lucien Partners, which is a registered lobbying firm representing clients across the country in front of public agencies, including the California legislature. And he is an attorney. Darryl, Lucien, welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we'll start with you, Jade. Just break it down. What is 40 acres conservation? What is that?
Yeah, so the 40 Acre Conservation League is California's first Black-led land conservancy. We were created with the goal of fostering greater human connections to nature and to increase community support for its protection. In order for that to happen, we think about it like this. One, we want to maximize our exposure to nature and eliminate land use practices that do not benefit us. Secondly, we want to maximize our participation in outdoor recreation by developing recreational spaces in nature that are inclusive, safe, and accommodating. And three, just be honest about the fact that conservation is this really big business, and people of color should be able to benefit from that. And so collectively, we refer to that as our three pillars, which is environmental justice, recreational justice, and economic justice.
And, you know, it's funny when we think about recreation and the environment, especially when you think environment, a lot of people do think white. When you think recreation, we don't necessarily connect the dots with justice so much. I think the Bruce's Beach conversation may have started to change that. But Darryl, Lucien, maybe you can make the case for why there is a connection.
Well, there's definitely a connection because when you think about the size, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit from the water perspective, but when you think about the size of California's outdoor recreation economy, this is a $97 billion market, right? And so the question I think that Ms. Stevens is probably getting at, and certainly that we get at, is we're a part of this market. The question is, are we consumers or are we on the entrepreneurial side? And so when it comes to recreation, you know, that's one thing that is definitely top of mind. But the other thing that is really important when we think about outdoor recreation, we're not necessarily talking about your neighborhood parks. We're talking about industries like, you know, the skiing industry. We're talking about boating. We're talking about fishing. And so when we think about these industries, oftentimes what you have to do is you have to go out beyond the city limits to really get into what most folks will consider the great outdoors. And when you get into the great outdoors, one of the first things you're likely to run into is a Confederate flag or two or something very similar. And so these spaces just haven't been spaces that people of color, specifically African Americans, have really wanted to deal with, right, when they think about recreation and enjoyment and relaxation. And so I think that's why these two efforts are really intertwined.
So, Jade Stevens, bring us back to your three pillars again.
Yeah, I mean, Darryl, I really want to dial in on what you were talking about with recreational justice and the idea that we are solely consumers. I mean, this myth has been ongoing that Black people don't enjoy the outdoors and that it's hard for us to be imagined in, you know, the mountains hiking or skiing or boating or fishing. But I mean, the reality is we've been doing this forever. I mean, for me, when you think about a girls' trip, I'm making plans with my friends to go to the Caribbean, to go to other places, to go whitewater rafting. We're taking pictures on waterfalls. Like, we're out there. But there's this disconnect here in the States, in our own backyard, that creates this idea of, not feeling welcome and not feeling
Yeah, I
safe.
mean, that's the point of us, how we're portrayed as opposed to our reality. How many black bicycle groups and,
Me.
hiking groups and, yeah, I mean, I'm that girl too. I'm not a bicycle person, but I will hike a mountain. Give me a mountain, I'll hike it. That's not the reality. That's the portrayal, right?
Right.
But so I guess what I'm asking you to connect the dots here, you said you have 3 pillars, dealing with conservation, recreation. What's the third one?
And you said environmental, recreational, and economic justice.
Economic justice. So how is that a land trust? Bring me to the land trust part.
Yeah, so I think that one thing that comes to mind is when when we're thinking about Black populations, right? Like, we're in highly urban areas, we're disconnected from the outdoors. And so this idea of being able to be exposed to the outdoors, and understanding that we have a claim and stake into it through entrepreneurship like conservation is really how we see the 40-Acre Conservation League intersecting. It is possible to enjoy the outdoors as a consumer, but there's also more ownership when you actually own that land. And so being the 40-Acre Conservation League, to do something like this, we're really hoping to leave a trail for others to imagine themselves in an opportunity to own land as we do.
And when you talk about ownership in that space, it's interesting that you mentioned conservation as a business, and I'm going to flip this back to you, Darryl, because water is one of those flashpoints, right? Where you have what we typically think of as business interests or the needs of big cities, and being able to create new housing, which you can't do if you don't have water for them, and the traditional groups like Sierra Club or whatever that are typically blocking those projects or have their own agenda for land use. So, but I don't think of conservation or environmentalism as a business. Why is that wrong?
I think it's wrong because when you look at all of our water infrastructure and where water comes from, and I'll be specific to Los Angeles County, we get our water from 2 places. Typically, we get it from groundwater, or we get it from rivers and mountains across the state, and frankly across the country. If you consider how
Colorado,
important
right,
the Colorado River is for our water supply. And so, when you think about conservation right now, there's a whole movement behind kind of what you're talking about with the Sierra Club. It's, we don't want to build here. We want to protect these wolves or these mountains. There's an entire industry that is set up which is the land trust industry around the protection of resources. And I'm sure Jade could probably share all of the costs and the professionals, the scientists, the engineers that they have paid probably just to even get to the point where they are, specifically as it relates to water. One of the biggest things that's extremely important when it comes to water is how we transport water from one area to another. And there are bodies of science, engineers, math, the whole nine, really involved with that. And so that's really what makes it a larger industry. There are also these things called in development parlance called mitigation. So when you build something that has a potential adverse impact on the environment, oftentimes what the builders are required to do is they're required to mitigate or make up for that adverse impact. And they sometimes will do that by restoring a very similar habitat but in another area. And in water, this is particularly acute in Northern California, given that Southern California gets a lot of its water from Northern California. And so there's just an entire industry behind this that it's important for Black folks to really understand that it's here. They're good jobs. They're phenomenal entrepreneurial opportunities. It's an opportunity to get outside, to work outside, but also to earn some real cash.
So how does, from the perspective of an equity lens, how does your work potentially impact that model.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're so proud to have acquired our first land property, which is 650 acres. And we think about it as really rectifying historical wrongs. There's a number that I think is really staggering when we think about the amount of Black land loss. It's upwards of $326 billion that would have been passed down. $326 billion.
Okay.
For
that sounds crazy.
Yes,
okay.
When it comes to land that was lost within the Black community, whether through farming or lack of access to, funding from banks, the Jim Crow era. There's a lot of reasons why land was lost, and so when we're thinking about the opportunity to achieve that or regain that, the 40 Acre Conservation League is really allowing others to tap into this growing outdoor economy. And as Darryl had mentioned, there's so many ways in, from being a scientist, an economist, a forester, consultants. So many of them go into really helping us understand how we can maintain this land to play into what the state's initiative is, which is a 30 by 30 initiative to conserve 30% of the state's land and waterways, but doing it in a culturally inclusive way. And so there's ways to bring more entrepreneurs into that space and really show them what conservation can look like.
So it starts with 650 acres. And what happened, where do you start with those acres? What are you doing with it?
Yeah, so it's been a very long process.
Yeah, I bet.
Darryl hinted at what we had to do even to be approved for the funding, which required a lot of research, right? Understanding what is on the land currently, what is the current state of it, what do we need to do to, again, reach those conservation goals. And that's just the first part of it, which requires not only research, but, funding to keep that process going. And so, this year we were awarded $3 million for that land acquisition. And that was really the first step. It was a huge milestone. We're so proud of it, but that's really just the beginning. As we move into the planning stages, everything that we talked about and honestly dreamed about in terms of what we want to have on this land, from, outside of conservation, figuring out ways to make it a recreational space that people of all backgrounds feel welcome to. This planning phase allows us to work with scientists to see what's feasible. So on the property, there is a 30-acre lake. There's an opportunity to figure out what fishing, could be there. There's great views of, mountains. There's plenty of hiking trails, but we need to make sure that the area is safe, that the brush that is there from that needs to be maintained is cleared in enough way that people will feel safe. We also want to really think about ways to educate more people on, what it's like to live in the outdoors. So does that look like a lodge? Does that look like a nature center? Is that a place where people could, camp and hang out? All of that is what we're figuring out in the planning stages now, planning phase. And then once we feel like we're in the best place to move forward, it's really, implementation of it all.
We are talking 40 Acre Conservation League. If you got a question or commentary, this is a perfect time to call 800-920-1580. There's so much to ask. Is this 650 acres the seed, or is it the whole plant? Where do we go from there? How does entrepreneurial ambition fit with the conservation model? All that and more when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We wish you a holiday season filled with peace and love, and a new year rich with blessings. Mask up and stay safe. From all of us at KBLA Talk 1580.
People making lists, buying special gifts.
Environmental justice, pollution, and climate. In Los Angeles and across America, people of color are suffering and dying from disproportionate health impacts on a planet that has less than 10 years to prevent irreversible damage. Heat illnesses, respiratory illnesses, water-related illnesses, food system impacts, insect-related diseases, Black maternal health, and mental health effects. As the impacts of climate change mount, millions of vulnerable people, our people, are going to bear the brunt of these extreme environmental events, which will likely lead to forced displacement, loss of cultural identity, and other related risks. These realities are as real as rain. Stay tuned to KBLA Talk 1580 for more details about the most progressive multimedia and live events campaign any black media outlet has ever undertaken to combat the climate catastrophe. Experts, events, empowerment. It's all on the way from unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We don't black down. We level up.
Level up, 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 level up.
Meet LA's most affordable health plan. This open enrollment season, LA Care Covered is proud to offer the lowest cost health plans in Los Angeles County, featuring zero cost preventive services to help you achieve your wellness goals. Be part of the region's largest HMO network, featuring UCLA Health, Optum, and allied physicians without breaking the bank. We are here to help. Call us at 855-222-4239 for enrollment assistance. That's 855-222-4239. LA Care Covered. Your wellness, our mission.
Save big every day during Lowe's 25 Days of Deals. Right now, get these can't-miss deals on appliances. Get up to 30% off, plus save up to an extra $750 on select major appliances. And with Lowe's Pay, you can buy now and pay later to get instant payment options for online purchases. Shop these savings, because Lowe's knows deals every day. Valid through 12/13. Appliance savings vary based on purchase amount. Exclusions apply while supplies last. Selection varies by location. See Lowe's.com for details. Subject to credit approval.
King C. Gillette knows you're dedicated to your barbershop routine. But what about after? What's your routine for facial hair to avoid dry skin, itching, and beard rough? Well, the King C. Gillette Beard Oil is the perfect fit for making your beard feel as good as it looks. It softens your facial hair and moisturizes to help prevent itch due to dry skin. Get facial hair that feels as good as it looks. Just trim, wash, and soften. With King C. Gillette.
Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes, indeed. We do appreciate you. Jade Stevens is with me in the studio. Attorney Darryl Lucien on the phone. They are with the 40-Acre Conservation League concept. You talked about conservation, recreation, and economic participation in this sort of great outdoors, right? Conservation, you now have these 650 acres. Is that the first parcel of many, or is that the first step in a much more developed, or developed might not be the right word, a much more, inviting space?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's definitely the first of many. When we came up with this concept, the idea is that we wanted to acquire land that is really an opportunity for us to provide more culturally relevant and inclusive experiences. And so the way that we think about our properties that we go after is we want to find land that is nearby national and state parks, ideally in an area that we know the space needs to be protected, but also they need to be within 100 and 150 miles from major urban areas. So thinking like Los Angeles, San Francisco, the Bay Area.
Where black people are.
There you go. You see where I'm going with this. But it's important, right? Like if you're asking someone to go on a trip to see this land, which is in the Immigrant Gap area, if we say it's 3 to 4 hours away, these people are not going to want to drive there. They want to go somewhere that is nearby. So yes, I'm saying 150 miles, but really we're thinking of a place where you can get there within 2 hours at max, right?
Yeah.
That's a weekend trip. That's a place that feels within reach. It feels like an area that's a little different from your everyday, day-to-day scenery. And you can really go enjoy something and come back and see this as being something that's in reach. And so that's our blueprint in terms of what we go after. And so The land that we acquired is in the Immigrant Gap area. It's about an hour from Sacramento. It's right along the lines of the Tahoe National Forest. So that was the perfect place for us to target. And we're continuing to look for land opportunities that fit that same description.
Attorney Lucien, who actually, I've talked to a few land trusts, different, not like yours, but different kinds of land trusts, mostly in cities. Who owns land in a land trust? How does that work? Is it considered privately held? How is it funded?
Yeah, so for the most part, most land trusts are organized as nonprofits, and so essentially, the nonprofit ownership, it's technically private. It's not public, but it is not owned necessarily by any one individual. It's owned by that nonprofit entity.
So it would be controlled by the board of directors of that nonprofit. And how is it funded?
For the most part, land trusts rely commonly on a combination of government funding, usually state and or federal funding, and then also rely on, contributions from individuals, which is often why, the land trust space is not very, very diverse. Of all the things that we as, Black Americans, Black Californians have on our mind as far as our discretionary spending is concerned, donating to a land trust is usually not the number one thing. But when you tie it into what Jade was saying about the, more than $300 billion of land loss that Black America has suffered over the last 100 years, I think the organization is really in a prime position to say, hey, you know what? There's an opportunity to acquire land and to use that land to reduce barriers to participation in any number of outdoor industries that require, you to have a lot of land, whether that is farming or ranching, whether it's outdoor recreation, like was mentioned earlier, which is a very large and prosperous economy, or fishing, camping. There's a lot there, but usually that number one barrier is you got to own land, or you have to have access or site control of land in order to even consider really thinking about entering those industries. And so that's in part why these industries are not as diverse, because we don't have large land holdings like that and are largely out of reach of, African-American entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's so wild. I had the opportunity to travel to Zimbabwe this year, and it's the same issue with all of these beautiful, great, amazing outdoor spaces in Mosi-oa-Tunya Falls, commonly known as Victoria Falls. They are controlled mostly by people in Germany and in Europe that own this land, and they pay the indigenous Black people there, $20 a day. So, how do you ensure then, though, that just a minute here till news, traffic, and sports, that this is a Black-owned, it is owned by a nonprofit. So conceivably that could turn over, right?
Well, I mean, the way that we think about it in terms of ensuring the cultural relevancy is when we get to the point of providing programming, right? There's multiple steps that we'll need to take to get people that are here in Los Angeles and the Bay Area out to these amazing properties. And so the way that I think about it is going with people that look like you to fish, to camp overnight, really roughing it, in a tent outdoors with someone that looks like you. I can't tell you how many times someone has asked me when it comes to, camping, like, is there going to be a place for me to, plug my phone in, or, I can't get my hair wet, right? If I go play around in this lake. These are things that we joke around about, but like those are serious considerations of someone that's grown up in a highly urbanized area and realizing what it would be like to be outdoors with access to nothing. And so that programming that we'll have will help people really step through to that.
All right, news, traffic, and sports, and continuing the conversation on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I'm Ree Harris, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The FDA is approving sickle cell treatments that include CRISPR gene editing technology. That could open the door for thousands of patients in the United States and all over the world to receive treatment that has the potential to alleviate pain effects of the disease. The CDC says sickle cell disease affects about 100,000 Americans, especially African Americans with African ancestry. AAA predicts over 115 million Americans will travel at least 50 miles over the last 10 days of the year. It's the highest projection since 2019. Guess who's celebrating a birthday today? Regina Hall, Mos Def, Dionne Warwick, and Sheila E. And that's the latest. I'm Ree Harris on your home for 24/7 news, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
If you like using debit over credit, shouldn't you also get rewarded? Well, now you can with Discover Cashback Debit. It's a checking account that rewards everyone with cash back on everyday purchases with no fees, period. Check out eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Clippers are on a 4-game winning streak. They held on last night to beat Portland by 5. Strong game from Kawhi Leonard, 34 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals. Kawhi has scored 75 points in the last 2 games. James Harden and Paul George had 20 points each. Quick turnaround for the Clippers. They play Sacramento tonight at Crypto.com. The Lakers are in Dallas tonight. First game for the Lakers since winning the in-season tournament Saturday night in Vegas. 4:30 tip-off on TNT. More bad news for the Chargers in a bad season. They will not have quarterback Justin Herbert for Thursday night's game against the Raiders in Vegas. Herbert has a fractured finger on his throwing hand. The Chargers are 5-8. Even if they won their last 4 games, they will not make the playoffs. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
It's the gift-giving season, and we have a gift for you. Visit us online at KBLA.store for holiday savings of 20% off all of our KBLA swag. For the best in merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store right now. And be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all our official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580, at 20% off, but only during the holiday season. Happy holidays.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!
Do you struggle with occasional nerve aches in your hands or feet? Try Nervive Nerve Relief from the world's #1 nerve care company. Nervive tablets contain alpha-lipoic acid to relieve nerve aches, weakness, and discomfort, plus B-complex vitamins to support healthy nerve function as you age. Live life with less nerve discomfort with Nervive Nerve Relief. Learn more at nervivehealth.com. And try Nervive Pain Relieving Cream to block nerve pain signals at the source. Use as directed.
Sometimes I struggle to get to sleep. My body stopped for the day, but my mind is still running. So I take ZQuil.
ZQuil, the world's #1 sleep aid brand, has a range of non-habit-forming products to fit you and your family's needs. Invest in a great night's sleep for the best you tomorrow.
I'm awake and ready to take on anything.
Better days start with ZQuil nights. Explore our products at ZQuil.com. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating. And so, as a Black woman in recovery, hope must be loud. It grows louder when you ask for help and you're vulnerable. It is the thread that lets you know that no matter what happens, you will be okay.
When we learn the power of hope, recovery is possible. Find out how at startwithhope.com. Brought to you by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, Shatterproof, and the Ad Council.
Day 1, the hardest day. The day you hear,
"This is a type of blood cancer.
But day one is just one day. At the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, we are here to help you move past day one.
On day 45, I discovered an online community who shared great tips for in-treatment care.
On day 185, LLS helped me file my insurance claims properly.
To learn more and get help on day 2, day 28, or any day, please visit LLS.org or call 1-800-955-4572.
I learned patience from my adoptive dad. All he had to say was,
"Hey, you got this. Just breathe." Hey, we're pretty good.
Yeah.
Might have to start a band.
I got it.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate loses and love wins.
And we're talking with Jade Stevens and attorney Darryl Lucien of 40 Acre Conservation League. Jade Stevens is the president. So many questions. I'm going to try to get them in here. When you talk about a land trust, when you talk about this really new kind of model that you guys are creating with the idea of both conservation, recreation, and an economic entitlement piece, which many of us don't even look at in that context. How do you balance that, right? I mean, you got to have money to do anything with the land. And running a park that doesn't even have one single store on it costs money. And I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that when you're in the conservation space. But that economic driver can be a problem in terms of the environmental impact. So how do you balance those, and how do you even support a project like this on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, I mean, every day it's something new, and just like you said, trying to balance all three of those pillars that really uphold our mission is what we strive to find a balance with every day. When it comes to environmental justice, finding ways to meet the state's conservation goals, there is a lot of work that goes into that. Thinking about the current state of the land, right? It's in an area that is considered a high risk for wildfires. And so being able to rely on our scientists and experts and team to go out and really direct us on what's best to preserve this land is one thing that we are always focused on. But at the same time, being focused on also finding ways to bring more communities of color outdoors. We really need to look to our partners who have been in this space for years to see what's working, what are some of the best practices to not only educate those that are not as familiar with exploring the outdoors, but how do we do it in a way that makes them feel connected to it? And those two specifically, environmental and recreational justice, those are things that we think are so close together, because once someone is invested in the outdoors, someone that has not only memories, but recent events out there, it becomes a little bit easier when the people that you're trying to bring out there understand how important it is to protect the land. But the economic justice piece, really showing how there's an opportunity through land ownership, through the jobs, the economy that defines what the outdoor economy is something that we are really looking to translate in different ways to communities, because I think many might consider it as only being farming, for example. But as we've shared, earlier, there's opportunities through scientists. There's opportunities through literally running a nature center. There's just so many opportunities there that we really want to peel back the layers on for people to understand. And that's just an everyday challenge that we work through.
Yeah, we had, back in October, we had the Jones family. Michael and JT Jones were on. They're working with the group Where's My Land. They are fighting to get back their land, which was stripped from them in Alabama, precisely because of water rights. Apparently there was a well here which was supplying Huntsville, and it belonged to black people, and they were bamboozled, threatened, pushed off that land. And so it really makes you think not just about the actual acreage, but what that acreage has in potential that becomes more or less coveted based on the conditions on the ground in the nation. Attorney Lucien, talk to me about how that, your work around water rights plays a role here.
Well, yeah, I think that's an excellent example. Look, one of the most renowned settlements in the United States is a place called Allensworth. It's an hour drive north of Bakersfield. It was created in 1908 as the first city to be established as an African-American enclave in California. And, maybe less than 10 years later, it might have been, the town was decimated by white farmers and corporate interests. And what was that weapon of choice? It was water. And that was because effectively the town's initial water supply came from a nearby river. But after a few years later, what happened is that river was diverted by powerful white farmers who were trying to irrigate their own crops. The impact was that it cut off the town's water supply. Fortunately, Allensworth had a backup plan. They were going to dig wells and drill for groundwater. But the company that sold them the land and promised to help them dig the wells never actually honored the contract, although they did dig a number of wells for a majority white community only a few miles away. And so when you think about the context of water rights in African Americans, it's extremely important. One, because water is life, right? Water is health, as we've seen more recently, viewing cases like the Flint, Michigan, and Jackson, Mississippi crisis. But water is very much important to wealth as well, again, because of, and if we were to use the 40-acre Conservation League example from what I understand about their land, they have a number of creeks that flow through their property in addition to the lake. And effectively, what that creates potentially is an opportunity for them to explore how do we restore these habitats for, amphibians, fish, frogs, whatever the case may be. And as they're contemplating that, there are multiple buckets of funding, public funding, government funding, and other types of grant funding that will help them do that. All right? So if the restoration effort is a $2-3 million effort in total, I suppose the next question they may want to ask is, where are the black restoration companies, given that it's an all-black land trust, that are going to do this work? Where are they? Do they exist? And can we bring them on? And do they have the qualifications that would fit this need? There's so much sort of tied into it. But to get back to your original point about water rights, it's an enormous part of land ownership. Just like you said earlier, Dominique, when it comes to building, if you're going to build a subdivision, you won't get approved to build, a tract of homes unless you can identify not just a water source, but a reasonably sustainable water source. And so you're either going to try and tie in with a local utility that offers water, or you may attempt to, drill your own wells or something, but all of that has to be signed off. And so water just really becomes a really significant part of wealth building when you're thinking about land and how you're going to use that land to monetize.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of the Jones family in Huntsville, the city offered them $900 for the land with the well. When they turned down the offer, they condemned the wells, claimed it was unfit for human consumption, took it from the Jones family, and then built a pump house on the location. So hopefully there'll be similar to Bruce's Beach kind of story. But it was only recently that I, connected the dots in understanding that, working with this group here in LA called Groundswell, that if you are trying to build affordable housing or housing for the unhoused here in Los Angeles or any big urban area, you may the Sierra Club may have veto power over your project, even though they have zero interest or are 0% stakeholders in the welfare of that urban community.
Well, there are a number of laws that I think that are on the books. One of the most, I'll say the ones that is often the most controversial is a law called the California Environmental Quality Act. It's sometimes referred to in shorthand by the name CEQA. And basically what the law requires is numerous, sometimes dozens of studies to assess what the environmental impacts of a specific project are. And so you need to identify the environmental impacts. And then the project proponent is usually faced with an opportunity to try and see if they can mitigate the project. Can we move the project somewhere else? Can we lessen its impact in order to mitigate the impacts? However, oftentimes the people that you hire to perform these studies for you, whether it's a traffic study, whether it's a biological study or a water availability study, they often don't always disagree with each other. And so what you will have is you will have experts disagreeing. And if a group like Sierra Club or someone else believes that there's an impact that is not fully being captured, articulated, or hasn't been studied correctly, the law invites them effectively to file a lawsuit, which will then, stop the project in its tracks until that's ultimately resolved. And so I got to tip my hat to the 40 Acre Conservation League and Jade. They've got a bit of a path ahead of them in, like you said, trying to balance what is our impact on the environment if we invite, all these black folks up to the mountains. How do we mitigate that impact? Are there any sensitive or endangered species on site? And from what Jade shared with me, there's none on the site, but there's an endangered species maybe about a half mile away. So they've got to be thinking about all of these things before they really even get to the black empowerment phase, which is, we've got this land, we see these economic opportunities that are available. How do we, how do they introduce these opportunities to entrepreneurial African Americans that may have an interest in participating in these markets?
Yeah. When we come forward, I want to talk about what that looks like. Like, what are the obstacles that you're facing? How could community play a role, if they can, in, supporting the work that you're doing? And also, like, when do you expect folks to be able to come and recreate? Is that a word? Recreate. Jade Stevens and attorney Darryl Lucien are with me, and we're talking about a unique model, the 40 Acre Conservation League on KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
Did you know addiction to drugs like meth or cocaine is a disease and not a choice? But getting help is. If you have stimulant use disorder, you, your family, and friends may have a lot of questions, including where to start. Choose Change California can help. Make a change today and find a proven treatment option for you at choosechangeca.org.
For all of us, this generation and the next, there is simply no place in our lives for litter. And yet, it's everywhere we look. And unfortunately, it does belong to all of us. So, let's come together and create a litter-free, clean California, once and for all. Remember to properly dispose of your trash and recycling. Secure truckloads with tarps to keep debris from flying out. Clean out your car when you're at a gas station. Take pride in your community by organizing a cleanup event. Or join a cleanup event near you. Zero litter is the goal. Join us at cleanca.com. That's cleanca.com. Let's do it together. Brought to you by Caltrans. cleanca.com.
KBLA Talk 1580 is the exclusive media sponsor of this light of ours, activist photographers of the Civil Rights Movement. A dynamic new exhibition on view now at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This light of ours showcases more than 150 photos taken by movement insiders from diverse backgrounds that reveal the vital work undertaken by a broad coalition of organizers and everyday people whose collective action changed America. This light of ours is one of 3 temporary exhibitions currently on view at the Skirball, which together explore issues related to civil rights, immigration, and pluralism. Tickets and more information for all 3 exhibitions are available at skirball.org. That's skirball.org. SKIRBALL.org.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Find a righteous rage, and don't be afraid to say what you see. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
You know, so much talk about the ground we lose as Black people, and a lot of conversation around gentrification and us being pushed out, pushed away. That is why I love talking to innovators, and I feel like there is a real movement from folks that are trying to get repair and restitution, but also people that are finding innovative ways for us to show up, to have ownership, to have a stake. It seems like 40 Acre Conservation League is one of those. Jade Stevens is the president of that organization, and attorney Darryl Lucien also joining us. So Attorney Lucien was talking about the studies and all of the various things that you have to have, not just for a development in a city, but for a project like your parcel of land and the many more that will come. How do we help you navigate those obstacles? Because really they could be obstacles, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that the 2 biggest challenges that we've had have been, one, around funding. We've had so many attempts with submitting grant applications, which is necessary to fund the different phases that we move through to acquire, develop, and maintain the land. And so things that we've experienced in the beginning is, a lot of skepticism around an innovative idea like this. We understand that this is something that may be unfamiliar, but we've found that after we acquired the land and received that funding, many people think that that's it. And that's not it. The $3 million was meant to acquire the property, but there's so many studies that we need to carry out through our biologists, our ecologists, architects, and those that understand land use, and that's not free. And so we rely on, funding from the state, grants, and really just multiple sources that can help us continue to move that along. So, we're always open to receiving new opportunities that we can consider for funding. The other biggest thing is really just being new to this space, being the first, comes again with skepticism. Many are not so sure about the ideas that we have when it comes to being able to acquire a land that protects our habitat, but also is mindful of bringing more people of color outdoors. And so we've had instances where we've talked to, state officials, to, partners in the conservation industry that really don't understand what we're trying to do and may not have been as supportive. And so to your question of, what can the community do? I think back to the hearing that we had with the Wildlife Conservation Board, and we had upwards of 75, 80 people in there supporting us with signs, coming up to, talk on our behalf to say that this idea is necessary, it needs to be supported, and it needs to be taken seriously. So if you're listening, please follow us on social media. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. You can even go to our website to learn more about ways to stay in contact with us. But we need more voices to say that we deserve to be in this space. And if you want to get involved or learn how there are ways to get involved in more economic opportunities, Darryl mentioned to it earlier about having Black restoration companies, but we are looking to really diversify that pipeline. So if you have an expertise that could benefit an opportunity in the outdoor economy and what comes with, maintaining the land, we really want to reach back and pull everyone forward through this project.
Darryl, what do you want to add on to that as far as the ways we can support this project and, and educate ourselves more moving forward? Because it sounds like from water, which, I think will be an increasingly loud conversation in the next decade, to this, understanding of conservation, this understanding of recreation and how we have been excluded. Sometimes it's a self-imposed exclusion, but many times it's not. What else should we know, Attorney Lucien?
I think it's important. I think it's important sometimes to just sort of think and reflect. And I like where 40 Acre Conservation League is going, because what they're effectively saying is, hey, we belong out here. We belong in terms of ownership of agricultural lands, in terms of ownership of timberlands, in terms of ownership of beachlands and our coastal lands. I think the biggest thing to tack on to what Jade said is to just, stay in touch, go on the website, sign up for the newsletter, follow the Twitter and all of that, because there's a real movement here that is emerging to really democratize access to land and to build up the Black land IQ, to build up the Black water IQ as a form of empowerment. And so it's a really special opportunity and undertaking.
I think it sounds so funny when you say raise our land IQ or our water IQ when we've had it, literally submerged in lakes, burned to the ground, stolen from us, bamboozled from us. It's like we had it.
Absolutely.
But, so we've had some IQ. We've had this history. And so it's almost like reclaiming more than gaining, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's really what it's about, because we've been so, I think, again, divorced from it. I think I was told a story, it was earlier this year, about a young Black woman who went through a farm academy program, and she wanted her own land, and she was farming, and it was expensive, and she couldn't find anything, certainly nothing even close to within the parameters that Jade outlined in terms of being just outside of an urban area. So she decided to buy, I think it was 50, 60 acres in Mariposa County, which, if you don't know where that is, that's sort of one of the main counties that houses Yosemite National Park.
Okay, 60 seconds here, Attorney Lucien.
And basically what happened is she had such a bad experience sort of in that environment and in that ambiance as a Black woman that she sold the land and left. And I think, this is a real opportunity. This is a real opportunity to sort of combat that with a little bit more muscle. So appreciate the 40 Acre Conservation League and what they're doing.
Thank you so much. Tell us, you guys have a website or?
Yes, 40 Acre Conservation League. You can find us on Twitter at 40 Acre League. Not hard to find. Please reach out, and we're happy to bring everyone along for the ride and share updates as we move through this. Thank you.
All right. Well, Jade Stevens and Darryl Lucien, thank you so much. We got to go. Tavis Smiley is up next. My quote for the day: Frederick Douglass says, "Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them." Think about that. I'm Dominique DiPrima. History is right now, and we are making it together. Visit us on the socials, KBLA 1580 on every platform. Follow me, DiPrima Radio, DiPrima, and then radio. Like, follow, subscribe. We do appreciate you. Until tomorrow, Go outside. Get some sun. One love.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Ree Harris, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The FDA is approving sickle cell treatments that include CRISPR gene editing technology. That could open the door for thousands of patients in the United States and all over the world to receive treatment that has the potential to alleviate pain effects of the disease. The CDC says sickle cell disease affects about 100,000 Americans, especially African Americans.